Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 66th chapter, which is the last chapter in the book of Isaiah. And it mainly deals with the dichotomy of Israel, right? On the one hand, right, the Israelites that fear the Lord and that believe in him, and on the other hand, those that are that may outwardly profess themselves to be believing in the Lord, but they're really going in their own ways and not the ways the Lord has instructed for them. Okay, and it also covers the Lord's reaction to that and the judgment / reward that will come to each one accordingly. So this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 66, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that ye build unto me, and where is the place of my rest? And the way this is worded, it's not necessarily the Lord asking with intent to know, but being a bit more sarcastic, as though, if the heavens are my throne and the earth is my footstool, what house can you possibly build for me? All right. And what place of rest can you actually make for me, which will be an actual place of rest. So to make that clearer, let me see, I think the CSB is pretty good. Yeah, there we go. This is what the Lord says. Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Where could you possibly build a house for me, or a house for me? And where would my resting place be? And that's why I believe in the book of Acts, if I'm not mistaken, it mentions the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Which, let me see if I can actually pull that up since I mentioned it. I think it's Acts 7. But anyway, let me just reference it. Temples. Yep, and wow, that's the spirit. That's actually I think this is quoting Isaiah actually. Right, it says, but Solomon built him an house, howbeit the Most High dwelleth not in temples made with hands, as saith the prophet. Heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What house will ye build me, saith the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest? So I believe this was this Stephen that was speaking here? I believe this was, yep. And he was quoting Isaiah here. And what he means by that is, sometimes the Lord makes his presence, he makes his presence known in the temple, for example. But that's not his dwelling place per se, right? And that's why, this was mentioned here. You can't contain the Lord in a temple made with your hands. But anyway, back in verse 2 in Isaiah 66, for all those things hath mine hand made, and all those things have been, right? Saith the Lord. So the building and the house and all that, they're gonna come of me, right? Because everything you're gonna use to do that, I made it at the end of the day. Which goes to show that the Lord isn't looking for these kinds of physical or materialistic or tangible in that sense things, right? He's looking for something more, as he goes on to say, but to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit. When it says poor, it doesn't necessarily mean one that is physically poor, though it could be referencing that, right? You could be physically poor and exhibit the traits the Lord is looking for, but it doesn't mean you have to be poor to fit this description here. By poor, it's mainly referring to in the spirit, because one that is poor is constantly yearning, right, for what they lack. In the physical sense, it would mainly be like food, right, or shelter, but primarily it's food. So when you're poor in spirit, you're yearning for what you lack, which in this case would be the Lord, right, or the truth, or the right way that would nourish your spirit. Those are the ones the Lord looks to, because they that are of a poor and contrite spirit are humble, okay, and ultimately would seek the Lord. And they're the ones who he's looking for, because they're going to be sincere. and tremble at my word, or and trembleth at my word, right? Which means that they fear the Lord enough to adhere to his commands, okay, and not being stiff-necked, okay, or brazen or bold against the Lord. Verse 3. So that's why I mentioned the dichotomy, right? So you have on one hand those the Lord who is going to acknowledge, right, which are the humble and the meek and the contrite in spirit, and then you have the others, which are the hypocrites, who outwardly go through the motions of serving the Lord, but they're actually wicked. And so in verse 3, what the Lord is saying here via Isaiah is, as we're about to read, these individuals here who have decided to do their own thing, they don't want to follow the ways I've set before them. When they come to sacrifice, on my altar, and they come to bring, oblations and gift offerings, this is what is like to me. All right. So as it says, he that killeth an ox, i.e., to offer or to sacrifice an ox, is as if he slew a man. It's like you're offering a human sacrifice. He that sacrificeth a lamb, as if he cut off a dog's neck. Cutting off a dog's neck is another way of saying you're offering a dog, because any animal, right, when you come to offer it, it's alive, and then you have to kill it. And typically, like, even for example, if you were dealing with like a chicken, you would cut its neck, right? You would dig a hole in the ground, cut its neck, and drain all the blood out, cover it up, and then you would prepare it. So as the Lord is saying here, you hypocritical Israelites that are wicked, but you pretend to be righteous, right, for the image. And when you bring these sacrifices onto me, it's like you offering a dog upon my altar, or a human sacrifice upon my altar. The Lord is saying that's how I see it. He that offereth an oblation, as if he offered swine's blood, right? And that oblation being like a gift offering or a grain offering, is like you're offering an abomination, right? Swine's blood. He that burneth incense, as if he blessed an idol. See, so the Lord is like, that's how I look at your so-called righteousness. And it's like saying, kissing your adulterous wife, knowing the things that she does behind your back, is like, it feels almost like you just made out with a pig. And the reason is pigs, they're disgusting, right? Like, in the sense that sanitary wise, like, they'll even eat their own feces, right? Or even their own babies. So it's the feeling that is invoked within you, right? Nobody wants to kiss a pig, right? You get a dirty, shit mouth pig, for example. You don't kiss that. It's like a disgusting feeling. But imagine a woman that's cheating on you, blowing other men's rods, and gargling their copulation, right? And then seed of copulation, and then coming back and kissing you, right? Yeah, a kiss is supposed to be intimate, but a kiss from her feels like that. So that's what the Lord is saying. Like, yeah, sacrifice is supposed to be a beautiful and acceptable thing in the eyes of the Lord, but a sacrifice from these wicked Israelites, it feels like a human sacrifice, or a dog, or a swine's blood. Yea, they have chosen their own ways, right? So they've chosen to follow the ways of their own minds rather than the ways the Lord has set for them. And that's how they end up worshiping these idols, committing acts of the ungodly, and transgressing the ways of the Lord, because they're following their own ways. And their soul delighteth in their abominations. So the things they take pleasure in are the things the Lord hates, the things the Lord sees as abominable. But that's what they want to do. Verse 4, I also will choose their delusions. When you go into the word delusions here, one of the words is vexation. So the Lord is like, since you want to follow your own ways and do abominable things and be happy in that, I'm going to choose things that are going to vex you. Okay, and I will bring their fears upon them. And I'm going to make your fears a reality. Why? Because when I called, none did answer. When I spake, they did not hear. What this means is of them, right? Of the portion of Israel that are wicked, because we know that the elect would hear and would answer, right? But of these who the Lord is addressing right now, none did answer, right? And the Lord called by sending messengers, and they all constantly disregarded the messengers and the message of the Lord. When I spake, they did not hear, but they did evil before mine eyes, and chose that in which I delighted not. It doesn't mean they went up to the heavens and started committing adultery in front of the Lord, but it means knowing that the Lord is constantly watching, all right, he sees everything, they continue to commit iniquity, where the Lord witnesses it and he gets upset. He doesn't delight in it, all right? And they've been doing that of old, even up until now. Hear the word of the Lord Yahweh, ye that tremble at his word, right? So now back to those that will actually listen, that actually fear the Lord, listen up. Your brethren that hated you, right? So your fellow Israelites that disliked you and hated you, that cast you out for my name's sake, said, let the Lord be glorified, right? And casting you out for the Lord's name's sake, right? They ostracized you, and basically kind of like belittled you or try to just like disregard you for the name of the Lord's sake, or the sake of the Lord. You get what I'm saying. But it's not just because you say the name of the Lord, it's what comes with that. It's the actions and the way of life, right? That that causes these wicked Israelites to hate those that fear the Lord and tremble at his word, and to cast them out. And then hypocritically, to feign themselves as being righteous, they make it seem like the Lord is with them by saying, oh, let the Lord be glorified, that we are casting out these wicked people here, or blah, blah, blah. But the Lord says what? Don't worry about that, because though they may do all of that, but he shall appear to your joy, and they shall be ashamed, right? So at the appearing of the Lord, it'll be to your joy, to your rejoicing, to your benefit. But for the rest, it'll be to their shame, their suffering, and their demise. And there are precepts on that, like Wisdom of Solomon, the 5th chapter, Isaiah 65, like we went into yesterday, 13 on down, and many other precepts. A voice of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, a voice of the Lord Yahweh that rendereth recompense to his enemies, right? So this, it's like there's a sound, there's noise coming from the city, there's noise coming from the temple. And what is this noise, or this voice? Is the sound of the Lord rendering recompense, or that judgment, to his enemies. So what does that sound like in the form of in a real life form? It'll sound like chaos or suffering or fear, because that's what it's like when the Lord brings judgment against his enemies, and his enemies involve wicked Israelites as well as the heathen nations. Before she travailed. Now this is dealing here, this verse down to the subsequent verses, about maybe the 9th, 7 to 9, is dealing with the rebirth of Israel. But Israel being reborn in a righteous state without having to suffer the pains that come with birth, right? So the transition, or the rebirthing of Israel is going to be one that is almost like a miraculous thing that the Lord is going to do. Therefore, he likens it in this analogy to a woman that gives birth without even going through birth pains. All right. So as it says, before she travailed, which is to actually go through the pains and the contractions and so on, she brought forth, she had a baby. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. So before even those birth pains and that suffering came, she already had the baby. Okay. And that is to signify this isn't something that happens, right? But it's symbolic to represent the miraculous way in which Israel is going to be reborn in a righteous sense. And the subsequent verses sort of expound on that a bit, right? Verse 8, who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Because this is like, who has ever heard of that, right? Like, that's against nature. That doesn't happen, right? Who has ever seen that happen? This lady, before she even, she goes into labor, no pains, no none of that, and boom, the baby's here. Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? So a nation of people doesn't just spawn out of nowhere, right? Just like that. And the earth when you put something in it and you plant, it doesn't take a day, right? You don't have yesterday you planted this apple seed, today you have an apple tree and it has fruits on it already. That doesn't happen. But as it's saying here, for as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Okay, so when it was time for Israel or Zion to give birth, immediately she brought forth her children. So, and this is referring to our deliverance. Okay, this is referring to the transition from these curses that we're under into that joyous state in the kingdom, which is going to be likened onto us being reborn. Okay, without having to suffer the birth pains. Okay, and it's going to elaborate on that as we go on down. So here it likens the nation onto a mother and the people onto the children. Verse 9, shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth? And what this means is like the Lord is saying, am I going to cause you to get pregnant? Am I going to cause you to go into labor and not, actually deliver the baby? Because we know that even though in a physical sense, you may have midwives or a doctor or whatever it is, the Lord is the one who actually orchestrates it all. Saith the Lord, shall I bring forth and shut the womb? So am I going to bring make you pregnant and here it is, you're about to have a baby and then I just close your womb? Saith thy God. So it's rhetorical. The Lord is not going to do that. Verse 10, rejoice ye with Jerusalem and be glad with her, all ye that love her. And who is that talking to? Israel. And who primarily does that start with? The elect. But as it says, rejoice for joy with her, all ye that mourn for her. Okay, and that one example is Ezekiel 9:4, right? Those that sigh and cry for the abominations are grieved, just like Lot was. Okay, but in the under the layer of that grief and anger is mourning to see the state that our nation is in. So we are counted as those that mourn for her, but here the Lord says we should rejoice. Why is that? That ye may suck and be satisfied with the breasts of her consolations. So now it's likening the fruitful state of Jerusalem that Jerusalem is going to be in to like a pregnant woman whose breasts are loaded with nutrient-filled milk. Okay, and so the way we're going to benefit and enjoy Jerusalem, right, our nation and our land, would be like a baby that benefits by sucking the breast of their mother. Okay, and that consolation goes into the land, the rejuvenation of the earth. I mean, all the things that come with it. That ye may milk out and be delighted with the abundance of her glory. See, that's why the Lord is saying rejoice, because the time is coming when you're going to flourish as a people, your land, the earth, everything. And we're going to get to enjoy the abundance of that. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will extend peace to her like a river. And the analogy of using a river, Salakia, my throat's a little, but the analogy of using a river is that it's endless, right? When you look at a river, so long as there's water, it's constantly flowing. It's constantly flowing. So by extending peace to her, it's the Lord saying like a river is like saying she's going to have eternal peace. There's always going to be peace. And the glory, which is like the riches or the wealth or the resources of the Gentiles, like a flowing stream. So we're constantly going to reap those riches and resources of the Gentiles or of the nations, right? Like a flowing stream. Then shall ye suck, and ye shall be borne upon her sides, and be dandled upon her knees. So once again, the analogy of a baby that's being nourished and taken care of, right, in a tender and caring and loving way, is how the Lord is likening Israel once we're delivered. Okay, we're gonna be taken care of and loved like a baby. And that's why it mentions, then shall ye suck, right, like a baby that sucks the breast Ye shall be borne upon her side. The word born means to carry. So you can, you imagine when women that have children, they carry their children upon their side, right? They'll maybe have them in their arm. Sometimes they'll use their hip. Let me just see if I can find a picture here. A mother carrying child. Yeah, on hip. There you go. Yep, there you go. Boom. That's literally the image of being born upon her side. And as it says here, and be dandled upon her knees. When you're dandled upon her knees, the word dandled is it's like when you put a baby, right? You close your legs, you put a baby on your lap, or right, at the edge of your knees, and then you sort of just like move your legs to kind of just like move them a bit in like a fun and loving and caring motion, which sort of just is fun for them. That's what it's referring to. It's like playing with a child, right? So let's look that up. Dandling a child on knees. No, not dangling. That's crazy word. What's the word? Dandled. Okay, let's say dandled on knees. Yeah, there we go. I was hoping they'd have an image here. Let me see. Maybe we can do child dandled on knees. Yeah, there's not too much, but I'm sure we all know what that looks like, right? A child, that's you get the image, right? If it's not you, maybe it's your cousin or your sister or somebody that you've seen who has a child that, they play with a child. You see that. So verse 13, it says, as one whom his mother comforteth, so will I comfort you, and ye shall be comforted in Jerusalem. See, so it goes to show, and that's why this is the clarifying point of the analogy, right? You're going to be like a baby who is comforted of their mother, right? Or just like a mother comforts their baby, that's how I'm going to comfort you, all right? And that's how you're going to be comforted in Jerusalem. Verse 14, and when ye see this, your heart shall rejoice, right? Because when the Lord brings this to come to pass, and we see the fulfillment of this prophecy, our heart is going to rejoice. We're going to be very happy, right? Because this doesn't actually manifest with grown men and women being carried about like children. No, but what it means is we're going to be pampered. We're going to be spoiled. We're going to get whatever we want, right, from the Lord. So that could be planets, that could be, land, whatever. It says, and your bones shall flourish like an herb, and the hand of the Lord Yahweh shall be known toward his servants. Right. So we're going to be happy and we're going to be nourished. That's that bones flourishing like an herb, right? Being made strong and nourished. And the hand or the power of the Lord is going to be known toward his servants, right? Because his servants, the servants of the Lord, are going to see and experience the joy and the pleasures that come with serving the Lord. And we're going to know that it's the working of the Heavenly Father. And on the flip side, going back to the dichotomy, on the flip side, and his indignation toward his enemies. His enemies are going to know the Lord, but through his anger and through his wrath. Verse 15, for behold, the Lord Yahweh will come with fire and with his chariots like a whirlwind. How is this going to manifest? It's going to manifest by the Lord sending his son Yahushai. And it's going to be like the Lord is coming down himself, because Yahushai is the word of the Lord, right? So he embodies the motive, the mindset, and the mission of the Heavenly Father. Okay, that's why he even told either Thomas or one of the disciples, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So as it says here, the Lord is going to come with fire and with his chariots like a whirlwind. This is actually when Yahushua comes back on the earth with the chariots, and that fire is going to be destruction. Okay, and it's going to be destruction from the nuclear missiles and destruction from the form of lasers out of those chariots, which the world knows today as UFOs, to render his anger with fury and his rebuke with flames of fire, right? And that's towards what? His enemies. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh. A sword is a weapon or a killing instrument. And the Lord's version of that is going to be, once again, the missiles and the lasers from the chariots. Those are going to be likened unto the Lord's instrument that he's going to be using to plead with all flesh, Plead here means to judge. It doesn't mean to like beg or try to beseech you. The word plead here means to judge. The word there, shapat in the Hebrew, okay, as it says, to judge, to punish. Okay, and that's what the Lord is going to do. So going back to the verse, plead with all flesh that are destined for judgment. Because we know, obviously, this all is not inclusive of everybody on the planet Earth, because the elect are going to be delivered. They're not going to suffer this. And the slain of the Lord Yahweh shall be many, which goes to show you when that day comes, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to die by the orchestration of the Lord. Verse 17, they that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst. And the sanctifying and purifying is them dedicating and consecrating themselves not to the Lord, but to their idols. And the gardens behind the tree in the ancient world was like the groves, right, or the hidden places where they would go and do these sacrifices or perform these rituals for the idols that they served. So what that represents is those that serve these idols, though today they may not physically go to like the same kind of groves as in the ancient world, they do it mentally, and they do it by going to these different, houses of worship, as they would deem it. But they're basically doing the same thing in a roundabout way, just with a modern twist on it. As it says, eating swine's flesh, which is pork, and the abomination and the mouse. So abominable foods that you're not supposed to eat, they eat that. Some were doing this as ritualistic things, and some today do it for pleasure. So what's going to happen to them? They're going to be consumed together, saith the Lord Yahweh. So they're not going to get to escape the judgment of the Lord. Verse 18, for I know their works. And I'm going to read 18 and 19 together, and then we can break it down. Or, who's we? I'll explain it. For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. And I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations, to Tarshish, Pul, and Lud, that draw the bow, to Tubal and Javan, to the isles afar off, that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. Now, starting with verse 18, right, the Lord is saying here, basically, I know their works, and I know their heart, I know their thoughts, I know their wicked deeds and their plots and their schemes. And then it goes on to the thought here, right? It shall come to pass, because remember, the theme in Isaiah 66, which is mainly prophetic, is of the deliverance, right, of the Lord's servants, the rejoicing in that deliverance, and the destruction of his enemies, right? But it also mentions here, it shall come to pass that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. Now, in terms of the heathens, okay, we know that when the Lord gathers in these last days, in the end times, when he does a gathering of the actual Gentiles, the heathens, it's not going to be to see his glory, okay? And in this sense, when it mentions his glory here, it's not just a showing of his power, but the majesty that comes with the Lord, or the that comes with being revealed to, or the revelation of who the Lord is, right? The Lord in this time isn't gathering heathen nations to come and witness his glory. When he gathers them, it's going to be to destroy them. Okay, so these all nations and tongues are referring to the Israelites that are scattered in these all nations and tongues, right? In these various nations. And that's in Revelation, the 7th chapter as well. And you notice usually when it mentions the gathering of Israelites, it mentions nations and tongues, because you would have Israelites scattered throughout the various parts of the earth that are looking like these other nations and speaking those different languages. They're the ones that are going to be gathered and see the glory of the Lord. Okay, first by this truth, but then physically be delivered. Verse 19, and I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them onto the nations. So now let's think about this. Dealing with this end time prophecy here, right? At what point in the scriptures do we ever see any prophecies about the Lord brings judgment, or he gathers all these heathen nations and then some of them escape, and then escape and then run to various nations around them. As it said, it lists a few of them here, right? Tarshish, Pul, Lud, to the isles afar off, different islands. And those islands that they run to have not heard of the fame of the Lord, and they've never seen the glory of the Lord. So these heathens that escape the gathering of the Lord are going to go to these other heathens around them, and then they're going to go and then they're going to declare the glory of the Lord amongst the Gentiles. When you go into that word declare, right, it says, let's see. It says here to tell, to announce, to report, to expound, or to publish, a messenger, right? There are no prophecies of that happening, right? When the Lord gathers these nations, it's going to be, and it says that in 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter as well, it's going to be a bulk that are going to be destroyed, and the others are going to be captured to serve captivity. Okay, so we know that this can't be referring to the nations being Lord gathering all the nations, and then some of the heathens escaping, and then going to inform other heathens or teach them about the glory of the Lord. All right. Instead, as we read up above, leading in here, the sign, as it says, the Lord is going to set amongst them. When you go into that word sign, it's a signal, right? A banner, a distinguishing mark, a omen, a token, a standard, a miracle, proof. Okay, or what? Remembrance. See? So of the nations and tongues the Lord gathers, which is where the different Israelites are, the Lord is going to set a sign, which in this time is this truth. Okay, at the forefront of that being Yahushua, of course. But by way of this knowledge or this truth, that is a sign, or that is bringing us back to remembrance that we are being drawn to. Okay, and I will send those that escape of them onto the nations. So here, those that are escaped would be likened onto, as a matter of fact, let me actually pull up a precept for this, but it would be likened onto the believers, okay, or the teachers or the elect that are scattered in these various parts of the world. Real quick, let's get 2nd Ezra chapter 9. Here it is. 2nd Ezra chapter 9, verse 6. Even so, the times of the highest have plain beginnings in wonder and powerful works, and endings in effects and signs. And every one that shall be saved and shall be able to escape by his works and by faith whereby ye have believed shall be preserved from the said perils, and shall see my salvation in my land and within my borders, for I have sanctified them for me from the beginning. So these that are escaped, or these believers that are amongst the other nations, okay, are going to be the ones, when it says here, I will send them on to the nations, to Tarshish, Pul, and Lud. Tarshish, Pul, and Lud is just a representation of the different nations about. Okay, and it says that draw the bow. When you look in another translation, it basically means they're known for like archery, for example. To Tubal and Javan, to the isles afar off. So the various regions, okay, or the four corners, you could say, of the earth where we've been scattered, you would have those which are believers, which are predestined to be preserved or to escape the judgments. They are going to be the ones that are quote unquote sent, okay, or in this time when the way it's manifested is by them being awoken by way of this truth and believing and having that sign amongst them, okay. They, as it says here, to the nations that have not heard my fame or the report of the Lord, neither have seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory amongst the Gentiles. So they're going to teach this word, okay, amongst the Gentiles because of the Israelites that are there, okay. So by doing that, you're going to have believers that are amongst the Gentiles in the different nations and different tongues who haven't heard the glory of the Lord or the fame of the Lord, and they haven't seen the fame of the Lord, and they haven't heard his glory. They are going to hear it, and they are going to basically believe by being taught. Okay. So you're not going to have heathens that are declaring the glory of the Lord amongst the Gentiles. These are going to be Israelites that believe, that teach, that are going to be declaring the glory of the Lord amongst the Gentiles, so that the Israelites that are amongst them can hear it and believe. Verse 20, and they shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord Yahweh out of all out of all nations upon horses and in chariots and in litters and upon mules and upon swift beasts to my holy mountain Jerusalem. So as to where when we were sent out of our land and taken captive by the heathens, we had to be, we were put in chains and fetters, and we had to walk upon our feet. When you're going to have Israelites that are going to be brought, right? The Israelites, you're going to have some Israelites that are dispersed amongst the nations that are actually going to be brought by the nations to Jerusalem, okay, post our deliverance. And they're going to be brought in a form of honor, like an offering to the Lord. The heathens are going to bring them like an offering to the Lord. That's why it mentions them being brought upon horses and chariots and litters. This isn't the treatment of captives, right? It's more so the treatment of people in high regard. As it says, see if the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord, right? So when you bring an offering to the house of the Lord, it's brought with delicacy, right? It's brought, you make sure that it's in good condition, it's safe, because it's to be offered onto the Lord. That's how it's going to be likened. Salakia, when these heathens bring the Israelites that are amongst them to Jerusalem. And there are other precepts in Isaiah that also basically mention the same part. Verse 21, and I will also take of them for priests and for Levites, saith the Lord Yahweh. Right. And I believe in Revelation 5, it mentions that the Lord is going to make us a nation of kings and priests because we're going to be sanctified and made holy unto the Lord. Verse 22, for as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me. The new heavens and the new earth is still the same planet, but it's refreshed. Okay. And the scriptures tell you the earth abideth forever. So just as it's going to remain before the Lord, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain, right? The seed of Israel and the name of Israel is going to remain. We're no longer going to be cut off from our name or our heritage. And we're not going to die. We're not going to suffer those things. That's in Revelation, the 21st chapter, right? So our seed is going to be continual and is going to be before, right, the Lord continually. Verse 23, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And why is that? Because once the kingdom of heaven is instituted, you're going to have, starting with the Israelites, but pretty much all of the Lord's creation, all nations are going to come and serve the Lord. They're going to have no other choice. Verse 24, and as it says, and they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. Now, as you read in Isaiah 66, not every verse this is not in 100% chronological order, right? And the reason I say that is because this what's that, verse 15 and 16 and 17 happen when the Lord comes back with that destruction, right? Verse 19, the gathering of Israel. Verse 20 happens before the Lord brings that destruction, because by the time the Lord brings that destruction, verse 19, by the time the Lord brings that destruction, those Israelites that are amongst the Gentiles would have heard the glory of the Lord being declared unto them. They would have seen his glory and heard of his fame, i.e. this truth or this word. Okay, so it's going to show you, though it's verse after verse, it's not all in chronological order per se. Okay, and I'm making that point because then we jump to, the kingdom, right? The order that's going to be instituted and the continual population of the Israelites. And in verse 24, right, this is referring to the time of the destruction, the nuclear destruction. Now it's worded a little trickily, but, we'll break it down so it makes sense. So as it says, and they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. And those that have transgressed against the Lord are those that he is going to bring that judgment upon. So their carcasses is in other words, their dead body, right? For their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. This is going to be the scene when we see them being destroyed, okay, in that fire, in that nuclear destruction. All right, because in the kingdom, there's not going to be a place where you're just going to go and see dead bodies. How do we know that? Well, we know those that die in America are going to be burnt up with this place. And we know that those that die in the East, in Ezekiel 39, it mentions that we're going to have continual employment to where they're going to gather the bones and the bodies and they're going to bury them. So there's not going to be any place for you to go and actually just look at the carcasses or the dead bodies of sinners or people that transgress against the Lord. All right. The visual of that is going to happen when the elect look down and see those that the Lord has brought that judgment upon burning, okay, in that second death. That is the viewing of the carcasses or their destruction, basically, from that bird's eye view. Now, when it mentions for the worm dieth not, remember, this is all symbolic, right? The worm dieth not. Worms or maggots, they eat bodies, right? That's human bodies, dead bodies. That's part of the decomposing or decomposition process. And if they don't have, I actually looked this up, do worms/maggots die without food? Yes, they do, right? Because like every other living creature, you need something to sustain you. So if worms, maggots, whatnot don't have food, which as we went into, they eat bodies, they're going to die. But here, as it says, for the worm dieth not, is to symbolize how much death there's going to be, to where, you know, it's going to be like a, as the saying goes, food for days, to where these worms are going to be able to eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. The use of this is not to say that these bodies that are going to be burning in fire are going to have worms in them, but it's just to signify that you're going to have a whole lot of death, right? A whole lot of dead bodies. So much so that these worms, right? Normally, when you have worms come up in the body and they break it down eventually, all you're left with is bones after a period of time. But when you have an abundance of bodies, those worms can eat and eat and eat and eat and never really have to worry about that starvation or dying. So it's just symbolic of the great death that's going to come by way of this destruction. And it mentions here, neither shall the fire be quenched. Now, when you look into, when you cross-reference this, I believe the complementary precept is Mark, right? This is also referenced in the book of Mark. What's that, 9 and 44, when it goes into the place. Let me see here. It says, if thy hand offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter into life maimed than having two hands to go into hell, which is not talking about a place where you burn forever. It's talking about the second death, the nuclear destruction, into the fire that never shall be quenched, where the worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. Now, when it mentions here, the fire is not quenched, it doesn't mean that the fire is going to burn for all eternity, right? We know that at some point, the fire that's going to burn in this land is going to be put out. Okay. But as it says here, the fire shall not be quenched. There's a difference with when fire is quenched versus if fire burns out. Okay. So what this is saying is that nobody's going to put out this fire, right? This isn't going to be a fire that, you know, is going to burn for a little bit and then people are going to come and put it out or basically be able to snuff it out. This fire, this destruction by fire that the Lord is going to bring is going to continue to burn and burn and burn and burn until it burns itself out. All right. It says, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. So basically all they that witness it, which, you know, is going to really start with the elect that get delivered, that are able to see that destruction, are going to look at it with an abhorring feeling, or of like, you know, a mixture of fear, but also of like awe. You know, let's actually look into that word abhor. So it says here aversion or abhorrence, right? Contempt. Okay. So in a nutshell, that last verse is really just going into the destruction, or those that are going to be left in here to suffer that destruction or that second judgment. And we know that because it mentions that fire, right? That the Lord is going to bring upon his enemies, all right, upon the wicked, which include wicked Israelites, but also heathens. And lastly, I just pulled this up here while I was looking into that. All right, I asked, is quenching a fire the same as a fire burning itself out? So it says here, no, quenching a fire is not the same as letting a fire burn itself out. The primary difference is how the fire is stopped, right? And then it goes into reasons as to what makes it different. But that's a key part right there. Okay, so the fire that's going to come from this second death or this destruction is not a fire that's going to be put out. Nobody's going to come and put that fire out. Okay, that's why it says it shall not be quenched. It's going to burn and burn and burn and burn and burn until eventually and naturally it burns itself out. And that brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, the 66th chapter, Lord, and also the end of the book of Isaiah in its entirety. So, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachak Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.